Well, boils and ghouls, it's your old pal, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Welcome back to Horror Heals, the podcast where fear is cathartic, monsters are misunderstood, and sometimes your first crush has a bladed glove and a deeply complicated backstory. Today's guest is the powerhouse behind one of the most badass, inclusive, and downright chilling events in the horror world. Ariel Baska. Ariel is a queer disabled filmmaker, writer, podcaster, and horror activist. And yes, her horror origin story starts with a certain burned-up dream invader named Freddy Krueger. But Ariel's journey didn't stop at fandom. She took all that monstrous magic and built something revolutionary. Access Horror, the film festival that celebrates disability and horror and genre cinema. And this year's fest is bigger, bolder, and, well, bloodier than ever. Named one of the most accessible film festivals in the US by Forbes, Access Horror 2025 takes place on August 1st with a 6-hour program at the DCTV Firehouse Cinema in New York City, plus global online access. Shudder is going to stream all 10 short films featured in the festival. But it's not just about movies. This year includes panels like Blackness and Disability and Horror, live performances, Q&As, and a silent auction with jaw-dropping items, including Piece of the Blair Witch House. Yowza. So yeah, we've got Freddy, film, fear, and fierce resistance on the agenda today. Let's get into it because 1, 2, Ariel's coming for you. Ariel, welcome to the Horror Heals podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is gearing up to be an exciting summer for you, right?
It is kind of a ridiculously exciting summer, if I may say so myself. It's gotten a little out of control. I have a major film festival happening August 1st in New York City and also online and on Shudder all simultaneously. So it's kind of a shocking thing.
That's so cool.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, we're big Shudder fans and love film festivals and horror cons and all that stuff. So, and actually, New York City is just like a 4-hour train ride away from us here in the seacoast of New Hampshire. So,
Ooh.
Don't be surprised if we show up.
Sweet. That would be wonderful. I'd love to have you.
Thank you. So at this stage, what could fans be expecting at the film festival?
Yeah, so Access Horror, this year we're doing 2 shorts blocks. We're only featuring short films this year. This year in 2025, we're happening at the DCTV Firehouse Cinema in Soho. And we have 2 blocks of short films. We have a live podcast recording from Blurdy Massacre on Black women in disability and horror. We have a live performance from singer Maya Azucena. And we have an award ceremony presided over by the editor-in-chief of Fangoria, Phil Nobile Jr. himself. And it should be a really fabulous time with Q&As with filmmakers and a lot of different ways to connect with disability and horror. Our tagline is so inclusive, it's scary.
I like that.
I think that gives you a general sense of the vibe.
Absolutely. And, this kind of representation is so important now. I mean, as you're well aware, we're living in very tumultuous times in this country. And having a film festival like this, I think, representing all sorts of folks is really important.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, it's made the imperative clearer for a lot of people who were afraid to speak up at one time. I think in a lot of ways, you just can't afford not to anymore.
So let's go back to your discovery of horror and how it became such an important part of your life.
Absolutely. So I'll just be completely frank. That's the subject of my documentary, Monstrous Me, that's coming out as a short form, the short form version of it, that is specifically about the moment I discovered horror, is coming out in 2026. For me, the discovery of horror came in the shape of Freddy Krueger. I was a 3-year-old child who was disfigured. I had facial differences because I was born with a capillary hemangioma that covered half of my face and left me blind and deaf on the right side. And I, obviously had disabilities, but I didn't recognize myself as having disabilities. And because I was blind in one eye, I couldn't actually see the right side of my face. So I didn't know what people were talking about when they were calling me monster and pizza face and things like that. But then at age 3, a bad babysitter brought over a bag of weed, her boyfriend, and a VHS of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I fell in love. I fell in love with Freddy. And honestly, it was like a lightning rod moment for me. But literally at age 3, something unlocked for me. I suddenly had some kind of self-awareness around how other people were seeing me. I had a sudden sort of feeling of empowerment because all of the depictions my parents were giving me of disabled characters were inspiration porn, characters who are martyrs, dying to be the most polite or the most, pure and good of heart. And seeing Freddy slashing his way through that high school just made me so fucking happy.
Wow, and that just even sounds like a setup for a horror movie. The bad babysitter with the boyfriend, and here's Freddy Krueger.
But I honestly love horror so much because it is the place where those of us who've been through traumatic and painful experiences in our lives can really connect with something that acknowledges that. So many of the films and TV shows we see on screen try to kind of sweep all that under the rug. And so there's always this undercurrent of, but that's not reality for me. Like, I only ever feel validated when I see someone getting their throat slit. Is that terrible or what? And that's not to say that horror heals everybody. Like, obviously, some people are deeply traumatized by horror and can't get images out of their head or whatever. But for the chosen few, I think horror has the capacity to do so much, promote so much resilience, and really echo the strength in ourselves.
I think that you're spot on, and you made me think of something that I hadn't really been putting together. Our doing this podcast, what I learned from listening to people is that it's all in the way that we approach it, right? Like the medium is there. And to your point, it can be frightening. It can be funny. It can be, it's all in the approach. And that's what we were talking about recently, Corey and I, about how great I think it is that my father was very instrumental in saying, now this is considered scary, but he would like preemptively get me ready for a movie. And it worked because I didn't have nightmares. I enjoyed it. Maybe we were just nerds, but he was talking about the cinematography and what the effects were like. And it was a true total experience for me because of the way that my father approached it.
Yeah. And that's so wonderful to have a warm and welcoming experience on that end.
Yeah.
My family was like, ew,
right.
What's wrong with you? It was like, no, we cannot rent that movie. I always had to gravitate toward packs of friends that would support me in my horror habit.
Because of my love for horror, when I did become a teenager and was hanging out with friends, I was the one that wanted to watch the goriest and craziest and, And I remember even my teenage friends being like, what's up with this guy? You know, I mean, like, why does he want to see all this? And it was just, it was my thing. So,
yeah, for me, I think I was kind of scared of some of the stuff early on. And I think it was actually a friend of mine, collected Fangoria magazine. And I think it was like seeing behind the scenes and seeing, reading about how they create the gore and all that stuff. It's like, oh, okay, this is art, this is, and I think for me that started to go away. I mean, there's still some stuff about types of body horror that eke me out, but otherwise it's all good. As Kendall said, you're preaching to the converted. Absolutely. I love your message. And even today, there is still a lack of representation in mainstream horror for a lot of us. I don't see Kendall and I represented in horror movies as like a middle-aged gay couple who, been together for 20 years. Instead, you get the sassy, best friend or whatever. Whatever. Those people exist, but there are all sorts of people in the queer world that aren't being represented necessarily in mainstream horror. So we would love to see that change.
Yeah. And really, intersectional representation is so lacking everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just in horror that this is a problem by any stretch. But when you think about it, like, people with disabilities make up more than 25% of the American population and stretch across every demographic, literally every demographic. But you only ever see white men in wheelchairs.
Yep.
If you see anyone who's queer, they can't also have a disability.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only allowed to tick one box. How dare you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's wonderful that we're finally starting to have this renaissance of films that actually explore these themes in really interesting ways. What I'm doing with my nonprofit, Ride the Omnibus, is promoting different forms of media that tell different forms of stories that get into the intersectionality, not because identity is the thing. The identity isn't the thing. It's the storytelling that is the thing. And the stories are so much deeper when you are representing lived experience.
As you've kind of gone on this journey, have you gotten pushback from people saying like, oh, there's no audience for, for this kind of thing, yada?
Okay, so I will be very honest. My journey actually did not start until 2020. And I will say I've definitely gotten pushback from people who said you can't do that, which of course is a dare to tell me to, exactly do the thing I'm going to do. So mostly that's been the format of any pushback I've gotten. It's just been like, well, no one has ever told me there isn't an audience. People have told me you can't get a named actor, in your film if you cast inclusively. A lot of times that's the thing. Like, you're not going to get to have a big star like Brad Pitt in your film. No one's going to pay to make your film if you don't have Brad Pitt playing the wheelchair user. We have a real problem with the pipeline of wheelchair users who need to be at the level of the Brad Pitts of this world so that we can get our stories made. But we also need to have filmmakers who even have access to the festival itself to even promote the thing and meet the funders and meet the people. And so that's part of where I'm coming from, feeling like both as a filmmaker and a film festival director, I'm thinking about the systems and the pipelines that exist for disabled people telling these stories.
Well, I think it's really great that the festival is going to be available for anybody around the world to have access to. But I also love that it's in person, and I'm curious if you have thought about the festival itself or elements.
Oh, we are. We are.
Awesome, because that is going to be so powerful.
Yeah. No, it absolutely is going to be live streamed. Last time around in 2023, I mean, for a first year festival, we actually had a fairly sizable audience. We had over 200 folks join us on Zoom to watch shorts and listen to panels about representation in horror and sci-fi. And we had panels on the history of horror, on speculative futures. It was an incredible time because we were talking about accessibility of so many different kinds, not just venue accessibility, but also looking at things like content warnings, looking at things like financial accessibility. One of the really great things that we're doing this year is that our programming is completely pay what you can, unless you want to sign up for our VIP experience, and then we'll do fancy shit if you sign up for the VIP experience. But otherwise, it's pay what you can, both to attend in person and to attend online. And then, in terms of trying to create some level of sustainability, we're also having a silent auction. We're partnering with the George A. Romero Foundation to have a silent auction that benefits the filmmakers in our lineup. Because we know to make films with a disability to make films, period, is a losing proposition in this day and age. But
Yeah.
to have a disability and do that simultaneously is so much harder. And so to help with financial sustainability for the folks who are making the film festival happen, we are supporting them with the silent auction.
That's fantastic.
How did you connect with them?
Honestly, I just kind of cold reached out on their website, if I'm very honest. I just went to their contact us page, and Suze Romero, George's widow, immediately reached out and said, I love your website. And oh my gosh, I love everything you're doing. And then she sort of became my patron goddess.
Oh, wow.
And Suze is the heart and soul of the foundation, and really, truly, like, just an amazing human. And, is doing so much to preserve George's legacy and support women and non-binary filmmakers, especially in places like Salem Horror Fest. She's also, sponsoring a lot of initiatives in other spaces as well. But what's really impressive to me is how George's vision was always about inclusivity and was always about making space for everyone. And I love that the Romero Foundation is still engaging in this work in such a deeply meaningful way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was fortunate enough way back when and spend a little bit of time with him. The entire Romero zombie family is just packed with wonderful people. I mean, they're great. One of my treasures is I've got a Polish poster from the remake and got George's signature on there, and Savini, a bunch of Tony Todd, rest in peace.
Amazing.
And the photo of me with George is definitely one of my favorites.
That's got to be incredible.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thing is I love going out and meeting these folks and, getting the autographs and things like that. I've just always been, that's been my obsession.
Yeah. When you get to meet someone who's had such an impact on your life, and it really transforms the way that you think about, your own identity and your own way of seeing yourself in the world.
What would it mean to you to meet Robert Englund?
I will be very honest with you. I have no interest in meeting Robert Englund.
Oh, okay.
I'm kind of a weirdo in this respect because I've had multiple people ask me this question. And for me, like, my fascination is with Freddy, the fictional character.
Yeah.
Not really so much the actor. Like, I mean, yes, he created my character, but so did Wes Craven by writing him. And so did all of the other people who brought him to life with makeup and special effects. Freddy, to me, is a collaborative team effort that is not just one person.
Yep.
And to me, like, Freddy has a meaning beyond just the voice or the character embodiment that Robert Englund did. It goes deeper than that. It feels spiritual, and it feels like it sort of transcends like whatever they were actually going for. And I don't want to ruin it.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm going to say a thing. I've never said this publicly, even though I have my own podcast and I've recorded a lot of episodes. I've never badmouthed my heroes before. But one of my favorite people of all time is Stephen Sondheim, the musical theater composer. I was absolutely obsessed with every single one of his musicals. That when I was a teenager, I met him and he basically told me to fuck off. And that's not to say that he's a bad person. It's just, I approached him while he was with friends. He was like, whatever.
Yeah.
I get it. But basically, since then, I've been like, don't meet your heroes unless you have a really good reason to do so.
Yeah.
I tend toward that feeling as well. Not because of any experiences I've had. It's that thought that they could happen and that I would just end up being an asshole toward the person. Be like, fuck you. I made you what you are,
Yeah.
Yep. And I could see that about myself. So I'm like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't.
Kendall's whole thing is like, why should I pay them for their autograph? They should be paying me for mine.
That's right. I spend a fortune to watch all these movies and buy soundtracks and you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
I don't discredit fans. And that's one thing I love about the whole festival idea. I think it recognizes fans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I will say I've had a couple of minor, not great experiences, meeting folks where I'm kind of like bummed for a little bit. But I befriended several of the volunteers at horror festivals, and they're quick to remind me like, hey, you really don't know if somebody's just having a bad day or whatever.
Yeah, it's very true.
Like there was the last one I could think of was like, it wasn't a horrible interaction, but it was kind of like, I'm the only one standing here right now. There's not like there's a line of 50 people. But then I was later told that this person was like freezing and like asked to be moved away from the open door, and they didn't have another space for him. So it's like, okay, I get it. If you're miserable right now, like you probably don't really care that I want to, talk to you about such and such.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because the relationship between celebrity and identity is such a weird intersection. I don't know if you guys have seen the film A Different Man with Sebastian Stan. It came out from A24 earlier this year, I think in like March. And it's a March of 2024. It's an absolutely brilliant film because it specifically looks at the experience I had of being disfigured and then transforming into something else. People encountering you on the street and thinking they know you in a certain kind of way. And feeling like they can comment on your disability or who you are as a person based on this thing they know about you. So what I love about A Different Man is that it extends that metaphor between disability and celebrity. And I think it's beautiful looking at it that way because I think it also makes clear exactly what celebrity costs you. Because you never really have a complete sense of self when everybody around you is building up a persona for you simultaneously.
Yep. Because I see some celebrities and, you want to believe that you're seeing the real person, but then all I'm thinking is, you know what? If I were constantly on display that way, I might not even know that I'm self-monitoring myself constantly. And how stifling that must be.
I mean, and I can tell you also because I was a teacher for 15 years before I became a filmmaker. I was a Latin teacher and a theater teacher, and I had boundaries. There is a persona you put on to work with your students. I found after a certain amount of time that having a narrower boundary was better for me in general, and being a little more authentic in terms of how I was talking to my students That was sort of a realization that came after my father's death. I realized that I couldn't hide my grief. Like, I literally could not stop crying in front of my kids. And to me at the time, it was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? They're seeing me cry. This is the end of the world. And then I realized, wait, no, everybody's human. We have to be allowed to show the fullness of our humanity. This goes back to celebrity by saying that, you know, everybody is human. We have to recognize that. And both sides of the coin are important. I'm so terrified. I'll be very honest with you, because I am deeply vulnerable in this movie. This movie is specifically about unpacking my relationship with Freddy Krueger, my relationship with other disability media, thinking of myself in a certain kind of way and embracing myself as a monster because I didn't feel like there was anywhere else that I fit. And it's a deeply vulnerable thing to dive into the topics I'm doing. And it's literally me looking into the camera talking in the short film, which is the hardest thing I have done in my life. I've been through 2 brain surgeries. I've had all kinds of things happen to me in my life, but this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I gotta say, like, really, truly, it's a deeply vulnerable, deeply painful thing to have to look into a camera and tell the story of, like, how you came to know yourself in a very painful way. And I'm kind of terrified of what's going to happen when suddenly everyone in the room knows my secrets and they're asking me questions in a Q&A. And I'm trying to prepare myself for that. I'm actually currently reading Hannah Gadsby's book, 10 Steps to Nanette, specifically about how she worked through a lot of those issues on that show, both in the lead up and the aftermath. And it's really fascinating to kind of, again, like I keep coming back to identity and celebrity, but like these are topics that are top of mind for me right now. Me too. And honestly, like, Nanette was such a game changer for so many people because it was the first time that people started thinking about, you know, is it the artist, do we consider the artist or the human first? And honestly, like, I have not come down on one side on that question. But I love that Hannah started exploring that in a very aggressive way. And it's an important question that I think we all have to reconcile in some way in this age of cancel culture and where consequences are much higher for marginalized folks than they are for anyone else. It's kind of a breath of fresh air to like read a narrative about an autistic lesbian in Australia worried about the carpet and how the carpet is so white at a Netflix Emmy party, and talking to John Stamos and Jennifer Aniston and obsessing over like the number of tiles in the carpet. And like, it just makes me so happy to know that's out there. Freddie specifically, I kind of had a very private relationship with Freddie in a lot of ways, in that I don't think I ever saw that movie with other people until I was in my 30s. I watched the movie over and over and over again. I watched all of the franchise by myself, but it was a secret that I had to keep from my parents because my parents were very judgy about my love of horror and my love of sci-fi. In high school, I had a group of friends. We would have sleepovers and do movie marathons. Most memorably, one movie marathon, we selected basically everything we could that had horror in the title or was in the cult section. And in this way, I think after watching between The Omen and The Exorcist, we watched Rocky Horror Picture Show. And it was just amazing. It was glorious. You know, I was not out yet, but I was definitely queer at that point. And it made my life so happy, even though it terrified my friends who were like, what did we just watch? But it was amazing and incredible. And like, obviously, like my love of horror, my love of cult, my love of queer things, my love of all of it came out to play at that one movie marathon. But we would do these and just watch so much content so many times over. That was my sort of secret outlet in so many ways as a kid. Like if I hadn't had that experience in high school, I might not have become who I am now. But it was so incredibly important to have that bonding and connecting with other people around horror specifically. But Freddy, it's so funny. I totally didn't even realize this until we're getting into this conversation. I've been writing about Freddy for years, and now I'm suddenly realizing, right, I didn't share Freddy with anyone until my 30s.
Wow. That's cool, though. It's just, it was your personal thing. I think that's great.
And we have a little confession. We have a life-size Freddy in our basement.
We do. Yeah,
Yes.
we do. We haven't really, we need to take more images of him.
Yeah.
It's funny. We've had him for years now. Just the other day, I know he's there. He's standing sort of in a corner. And the other day I turned on the light and I was like, it's hilarious that he still gives me that jump scare. Yeah, he's huge.
Yeah, so Kendall's favorite slasher series is Friday the 13th. And mine will always be the Nightmare on Elm Street, series. I remember being, I think, 10 years old, and me and a friend used to like movie hop, like we'd buy a ticket to one movie and then just keep going to different movies. One was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and didn't get to see the ending because we were chased out by the usher because we were the only two people in the theater, so they knew there were no tickets sold for that. But yeah, I don't know. There is something about Freddy 2 that really gets me. I know that I think they're remastering or just remastered Part 2, which is fascinating in itself. Mm-hmm. And I love that conversation is still happening. Mark would be a dream guest for us. And again, I know you shouldn't always meet your heroes, but he was such a sweetheart. And I've got a great picture of him holding the Freddy claw to my neck, and it's like...
Yeah. I've also met Mark, and I agree. He is a total sweetheart and gave me a huge hug.
Oh, that's awesome.
We literally just casually met at Fantastic Fest a few years ago, and I think it was because we both just needed to sit the fuck down.
Yeah.
And we happened to sit next to each other.
That's awesome. I'm very excited for you. This film festival is going to be amazing. You definitely have to keep us in the loop as to your short and the feature length. Very cool and very brave of you to open yourself up like that. And we know it can't be easy.
Well, and you've already said that you're terrified, and I just want to assure you, I can already tell you're going to do great.
You'll be great. Yes, you'll be great.
Thank you.
Who is your favorite final person in a horror movie? And we don't say final girl. We say...
That is a question no one has ever asked me before.
It's a tough one, too.
Yeah.
It is a tough one. On the surface of it, my favorite final person is Jada Pinkett Smith in Demon Knight. I think she is genuinely like... just going off the top of my head, because you didn't give me long to think about this. Come on. Anyway, but I feel like, when I think about favorite final people, you know, her character has something kind of transformative that she's been through. I feel like she as a character is someone that I would want to hang out with. I mean, on a very basic level.
Mhm.
Like, I think she's deeply powerful and also hilariously funny and keenly intelligent, and I would just want to know her.
Cool. I love asking the question because then I would say 9 times out of 10 it makes us want to watch that movie, that night. And it's kind of bringing us full circle now because John Kassir as the Crypt Keeper does our intro.
I do know that. That's probably part of why she comes into my mind.
That's so great.
Well, yeah, I like that. And that's the first time we've had that. So,
That's right.
but I will say that Nancy Thompson is my favorite.
Like, I actually say in my short film that, like, I hated Nancy. Like, I genuinely hated Nancy. Like, with a passion. I resented her for being too perfect and too, like, all the things. No, it's much better to be a monster. Much better to be a monster.
Yep.
Well, I love her documentary too.
Oh, I do too. No shade to Heather Langenkamp at all.
Right. Yes.
Not at all. But because I find that Nancy is so wonderful and you discover so many other layers in there. It's so beautiful. But like, yeah, my personal reaction as a kid was always like, eh.
I thought the same thing. Yep.
Okay, so I sort of lied about last question just because this popped into my head and I gotta ask. Just based on what you said earlier, what do you think your gut reaction would be if you saw Robert Englund walk into the film festival?
Oh gosh.
My gut reaction would be that my stomach would drop. And I would feel like I had to leave immediately.
Yeah.
No, if I'm being completely honest, that is what my body would probably do.
Yeah.
He's one of the first horror icons that I met. I can't remember if I met him first or Elvira, but got to spend a decent amount of time with Robert Englund because this is like pre-HorrorCon stuff. St. Louis is where I'm from and used to be kind of known as one of the top haunted attraction places in the country. Now they're all over the place, but St. Louis was one of the first. And this one haunted house called The Darkness would bring in horror celebrities to meet and greet the fans and didn't charge for autographs back then.
Wow.
Yeah. So we just hung out with Robert and his friend and just, shot the shit and just had a great old time. I've got an autograph for our nephew because Kendall's sister, who we found through a DNA test, is also big into horror. She named her son Gage. I'm sure you can guess why.
Yeah.
But Gage, when we met him, was just terrified of anything around Halloween. The very first horror movie he ever saw was with me, and it was the original Nightmare.
Wonderful.
And he was fine through it. He only had to cover his eyes for the nudity.
Oh.
And so I got him an autograph because he's huge into video games. So it's like a 8-bit Nintendo artwork piece of Freddy that Robert signed and even did a little video for him with the voice and stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah. We're good uncles.
When we find somebody who is into horror, we're like, okay, it's on.
Yep. It's on like Donkey Kong. You gotta go.
Exactly.
And even when it's someone who's not into horror, who just, opens the door a tiny bit for you. For example, my mother-in-law, I have the greatest mother-in-law in the world because she hates horror, but she said, Ariel, we need to sit down and watch A Nightmare on Elm Street so I can understand your work better.
Wow, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
That is literally the sign of a great human being.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's awesome. Yay, there's hope.
There is hope for this world, and it comes through horror.
Yes. Oh, wow, Ariel, I've got chills right now. It's been a joy meeting you. This is, we're so excited for you. So, we're sending all the positivity out into the universe for the film festival.
Thank you. And I'll save you a seat if you want to come.
That was Ariel Baska, a true force of nature and nightmare fuel in the very best sense. She's turning horror into a haven for queer disabled folks, carving out a space where we don't just survive the final act, we own it. And with Access Horror, Ariel isn't just showing films, she's showing us what the future of genre storytelling can and should look like. Inclusive, radical, community-powered, and unapologetically weird. This year's festival arrives at a moment when disability rights are under threat, and Ariel is using horror to push back, loudly, visibly, and creatively. So whether you're in New York City or watching from your crypt couch, get your tickets, stream the shorts on Shudder, bid in the silent auction, and support this community of creators who are literally fighting for their lives and telling damn good stories along the way. Because horror belongs to all of us, and thanks to Ariel, it's finally starting to feel that way. Until next time, stay haunted, stay heard, and remember, is horror good for mental wellness? Of course it is. The Horror Heals podcast is produced and presented by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.